Good morning, everybody. My name is Pete Marin, a recovered alcoholic. Grateful to be alive and sober and at a sacred place called Alcoholics Anonymous. I feel very privileged and blessed to be a part of this terrific weekend. My big book tells me that see to it that my relationship with God is right and great events will come to pass for me and countless others. And I must tell you from the bottom of my heart that this has been just a wonderful time for me and Linda. You guys have been absolutely wonderful to me. On the way in here this morning, everyone was so gracious and loving and warm and caring, but you haven't heard me speak yet. We'll see how it is on the way out. I'd first like to thank the committee and specifically Kelvin and Amy for their very warm hospitality to me and Lynn since we got here. It is one of the bright spots I've experienced in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I get to do this a lot, and this has been absolutely wonderful. I'm very grateful for this gift of sobriety, because since I got here in 1988, my life has been completely revolutionized, transformed, reborn, resurrected, because of the power I found in the rooms called Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a very, very sacred place, and I don't give that lip service. This is sacred, and I treat it that way. And when I got here in 1988, I was really at the bitter end and at death's door, and what you have done for me, I can never, ever repay you for the gift you've given me. Because in this wonderful fellowship that I was brought to by a loving God, I was placed here by a loving God. In this fellowship, I was brought to a program from the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. And somewhere between 1 and 12, I was integrated with a power greater than myself, a loving and caring God. That today I want to know, I want to walk with, I want to experience, I want to talk about, I'm excited about, and to pass it on. And once my spirit was awakened in here, Alcoholics Anonymous, I get to do service and pass that on to another drunk. Comes of Age says the basic service we provide is carrying this message, and the action we take is at the heart of it. It has been one of the many, many bright spots I've experienced in Alcoholics Anonymous. Sitting down with a drunk across the kitchen table, over your dining room table, or even over the phone. And they come to us like I came here with absolutely nothing, broken. And they submit to the 12 steps. Because there's no other place to go, and you watch them wake up and they go back into the fellowship and do some service, where service, recovery, and fellowship becomes one. There is no dividing line. And you watch them wake up and go back into this place and pull out another drunk. What a great deal that I've been privileged to experience, as my sponsors have experienced with me. God separated me from alcohol June 23rd, 1988, and I'm very, very grateful for that gift. And trust me, if you knew when I was drinking, you'd be grateful too. I say I was separated because that's exactly what happened. I will never say from a podium that I quit drinking or I stopped drinking. I mean, I quit many times and I stopped many times, but until God separated me, I stood separated. Every other time was a futile attempt to put down the bottle, and I can never do it. So I will never turn a miracle of God into a personal accomplishment and say, hey, I quit drinking. Because I'm a real alcoholic, the guy on page 21. And self-reliance failed me. No human power could relieve me of alcoholism. So I would never, ever say, hey, I quit drinking in 1988. Because I made many, many attempts, and there were many, many frothy emotional peels thrown at me, and I couldn't stop no matter how much I wanted to. And then I hit the bitter end in 1988 in the back of a hallway. And this loving and caring power got in the way of me and alcohol and interrupted my death, as he has many times. In fact, based on some of the things I've experienced in Alcoholics Anonymous, all the joys and some of the sorrows, if I would have quit drinking, you would have a different speaker here this morning. But God in his infinite mercy has kept me separated and has transformed my life to where I stand tonight, this morning. I say I'm recovered for a few reasons. First, my big book promises me that many, many times in the first 164 pages of my book tells me I will get to a place called recovered. So I won't shortchange the power of God and tell you I'm recovering where I'm in bondage of self. I will share with you the joy of God and the power of God by telling you I've been brought to a place called recovered, because that's what God wants me to be, free. And when I experience this power, I experience one word, it's called bliss. Why would God keep me recovering a day at a time in bondage of self? Now, many meetings we'll go to, we hear the word recovered, and the room gets split down the middle because they say, this guy thinks he's cured. And that is not what I'm saying. I'm saying recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I say that also because what great news it gives to someone who's here counting days. I was at the countdown last night, and there was a gentleman who got up here with 1 day. And I can tell you, if you're here this morning, you never, ever have to pick up a drink again. And that's what my book promises me. And that's what a loving God will do for you if you follow some certain simple rules. You never have to be in the bondage of self again. Ain't that great news to be excited about? That not only we get separated from alcohol, we can recover from alcoholism, which is what plagues me once the drink goes down. Once I'm separated from the drink, I'm stuck with alcoholism, and I work with these steps, and I'm brought to a place called recovered. I will never say recovering from a podium, but I always will say recovered, because when I say I'm recovering, all I'm doing is excusing a lot of inappropriate behavior for someone who's supposed to be on this path. And then I'm running around Alcoholics Anonymous with untreated alcoholism, doing more damage than good. I have a responsibility today to pass this message on. You look at the 3rd edition on the fly page, right on a little fly page it says, but the basic text pages 1 to 164 remain unchanged. This is the AA message. So the question my sponsor asked me was, what are you carrying? What kind of message are you passing on? So I have a responsibility. I have found in Alcoholics Anonymous there's so much more to this than just making meetings. Because my meetings don't keep me sober. Just working out of my big book don't keep me sober. Just working in service doesn't keep me sober. What keeps me sober is God. And what I have found out, the recovery, the unity, the fellowship, and service, all the wonderful things we get to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, what they are pointers. They take me to this power. They're pointers to God. And part of the spiritual experience that we have here, the spiritual awakening, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, what it is about removal. When I was new, I heard people counting days last night. When I was new like that, we always talked about that hole in the soul, that void we're experiencing. And my tendency, like many of us, was to go out there and gather stuff up. I need to get enough money. I need to get the right job. I need to get the right relationship. And it goes on and on and on. We start gathering up stuff, and we get a quick fix, and then it's empty again. And part of the spiritual awakening I have experienced is about complete removal. Waking up is about removal of ideas, conceptions, prejudices, judgments. All of it has to go. Worship of other things. So I get to a place where I stand before my Creator with absolutely nothing, like I did in a hallway in 1988, with absolutely nothing. The carpenter said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs." What great words, what powerful words. I stand before my God with nothing, and I experience truth. When I was first coming around, I would hear a buzzword in Alcoholics Anonymous called truth. I want to get to truth. I want to get to truth. I want to experience truth. Like it was a spot on the map somewhere, and here I go. I'm coming to truth. I'm on my way. And all it was about removal, always removing, constant inventory, having a meditative life, having a life full of inventory and amends, and having things removed over and over and over again, where there's nothing left between me and this God. When I got here in 1988, I knew nothing about this stuff. All I knew was at the bitter end, and I prayed. My only contact with a God, if you were out there, please take my life from me because I can't live like this anymore. I was brought to death's door in 1988, and I will never survive it again. But standing here this morning, I'm so grateful for it, because 16 years later, I still seek this power. I still seek this Alcoholics Anonymous with the desperation of a drowning man, and I'm very grateful for that. I've never lost my desire to seek. I seek experience. Not necessarily knowledge, because knowledge won't work for me, but I seek experience. There was a musician years ago named Jimi Hendrix, had a great album out called Are You Experienced? So my question to you this morning is, are you experienced? You having an experience with this power? Where are we currently? We talk about Alcoholics Anonymous, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. How many meetings do you go to? Do you hear people talk about the now? We hear a lot of repetitive stuff of things that happened to us years ago, but how are we doing right now this morning? Where am I with God? Where am I on all three sides of the triangle? How am I doing? My home group is a way out group. We're in Staten Island. We meet Sundays at 6:45. to 8 o'clock. We have a great solution-based meeting. If you're ever in Staten Island, please stop by. It's a great place to be. A lot of people in Staten Island do not like us until they hit a bottom in Alcoholics Anonymous, and then they look for us. And if that's my bartender ringing on the phone, I'm not ready. I got sober in Minnesota, and I was brought to my first home group. It was called the Free Spirit Group, where a lot of wonderful teachers showed up. God put wonderful teachers in my path when I got here in 1988. And this group was located in Brooklyn, Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. And with the only requirement for membership there, if you know anything about those parts, is a pinky ring, sunglasses, and gold jewelry. Back in Brooklyn, we turned how it works into, how you doing? And I will tell you the type of people, I like to share the sort of type of people God put in my life when I first showed up at the Free Spirit Group in 1988. I was the new kid on the block, and I walked into the door, you know, shaking and rocking and rolling. And I didn't want anyone to know what was going on inside of me, but they saw me walking in, and they knew I was new. And there was about 5 guys, some old-timers, who were going to do one of these AA outing, one of these fishing trips that they wanted to go on. Now, they'd never been fishing before, but they were going to go fishing. And so how do 5 guys from Brooklyn get dressed to go fishing? Like I am this morning. We were on a boat 5 minutes, and they're complaining about getting water on their new shoes. But so we were on a boat, and we set sail, and about 2 hours later, we're catching nothing but coals. And finally, my friend Sally Boy had the reel in the water, and he caught something. And he starts, pulling, and it's getting heavier and heavier, and we're starting to think maybe it's someone from the neighborhood we thought was on a long vacation. And he finally pulls this little fish on board, and it's flipping and flapping from side to side, and they're throwing punches at it and kicks at it. I'm starting to cry because I'm feeling spiritual for a moment. And so finally, Sally Boy gets his fish in a bear hug and goes to stick his head underwater. I said, Sally, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to drown him. Yeah, these were the gurus God put in my life. And I had the nerve to say I'm recovered this morning. That was my first home group. And I believe it or not, I met some really neat people who were on fire when I got there. And they told me about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they told me about the importance of experiencing this God, and they told me about giving back and doing service. And one of the great messages I got from them was what you hear a lot of in Alcoholics Anonymous that's really sad, and around my part anyway, and that is you need a year or more before you can sponsor someone. Have a year or more sobriety. Ebby showed up to Bill's house with about 2 months, and Bill showed up to Bob knocking on his door with about 6 months. Could you imagine if Bill waited a year of sobriety? Would we be here this morning? But it's about the Spirit being awakened. That's what it's about, whether you have 2 months or 3 months. So if you're new here this morning and someone's telling you, don't do the steps yet till you get a year or more sobriety, go seek someone else, because they're killing you. Because if I got wheeled into an emergency room, God forbid, bleeding to death, I don't want a doctor saying, just hang in there. So why is alcoholism not like a life-threatening illness? Because maybe some of us who've been around here got a little too comfortable and forgot what it was like walking in here. So a newcomer walks in here, I tell you what, I was sober 6 months, and people were telling me, loving people were telling me, just don't drink and go to meetings. And I was trying to do that, and all I could think about was drinking. I didn't want to go to a meeting, and I ran around here untreated, and my behavior resembles someone who was untreated. And December 22nd, 1988, I was going for a drink, and something said, make a prayer, and I did, and I showed up at a gentleman's house. And I shared with him my dramas of life. And he says, Peter, where were you right now with God in the 12 steps? I said, well, when do you start the steps? He says, when you stop throwing up, you're late. And he disturbed me on the question of alcoholism. So shouldn't we have a responsibility to those new people to give this message away as soon as they walk in the door? Or why do we wait? Maybe because some of us never went through the work and have nothing else to offer, and the ego won't allow us to say, go see someone who's gone through the work, who's gone through the 12 steps. We have a responsibility here. I came here to receive. I'm here to give back. I'm no longer the most important person at any meeting the newcomer is. Those people who had days and weeks last night, I bless you. That gentleman one day I saw me and you walking up to this podium last night. What a good deal. What a good deal. You are our future. It's very important for me to not only be an awake member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but also an informed member, to touch our history, to know about our history. Not just to know more, but to understand what it is I belong to. This is the way I was brought up in Alcoholics Anonymous. To tell you in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, and what I'm trying to be like today, a day at a time. I live a day at a time because that's my human condition. But my spirit, my God, does not wear a watch. It's able to just be and is. And I have found out from experience, when I'm integrated with this power, I'm able to just be. And who I be is no attachment to my thinking mind. It's way beyond my mind. It's in spirit. And ain't that a great thing when I'm not plagued by before and later on, but I'm here awake now to the present moment with my God. What a great gift to experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. My first drink came when I was about 14 years old. Until I stand here this morning, my life has never been the same, ever. I remember my first drink like it happened a week ago because it was that clear to me. I had an experience, a spiritual experience on my first drunk. It did things for me that I can never accomplish for myself. It was a Saturday night over in Brooklyn, and there was a church feast happening that night. And there were lots of people hanging around, and some of my older friends were drinking Colt 45 beer. And I remember what it was like for me. My entire life was never moved by God, but always driven by fear. And this night when I was about 14 was certainly no different. And I wanted desperately to hang out with the rest of the guys. But they'd be gathered just off the corner. I'd be about 20 feet from them and just watching what was going on. And they were roughhousing and talking to the girls and listening to the music, and they seemed to be experiencing being joyous, happy, and free, drinking Colt 45 beer. And I wanted desperately to get in there with them. But I had this judge that still shows up every now and then, this judge that screamed at me what a loser I was. I mean, I would try hanging out with the intellects, I had no shot. I tried hanging out with the jocks, I couldn't do it. I tried hanging out with the tough guys, and I got beat up. Wherever I went, there I was. And I just could never get in there. And so this Saturday night was certainly no different. And I wanted to get in there and take a few pops off the court and experience what they were experiencing. But I kept thinking of something else. My dad, who was power greater than myself when I was a kid, and cunning, baffling, and powerful. I mean, if he walked in the door, I'd look for an exit sign. He was a tough guy, a street guy from South Brooklyn, and I was not. And when he would show up, I would shake in my shoes, and he had given me many warnings about hanging out on the corner. He never wanted to see me drinking on the corner with those bums on the corner. And don't you dare bring any of those girls around this house. And I listened when he spoke to me. And it was clear, it was stern, and I was not about to debate with this man. And I kept thinking, if I drink, I know my dad's going to turn the corner and jump out of his car, and there's going to be a scene that I want no part of. And was coupled with, well, if he don't show up, I lay odds from here to Vegas, the cops are going to turn the corner, and I'm going to get beat up, arrested, and sent to jail for like 20 years for drinking beer on a corner. I wanted no part of that. But for some reason, till this very moment, I don't know why, but I put my hand in there and I took a few pops. I took a few pops off a quart of Colt 45 beer, went past my throat, hit my gut, and nothing happened. So on that, I drank a little bit more, and I drank a little bit more, and I drank a little bit more, and then I experienced something I never, ever experienced up until that moment, and our doctor's opinion talks about it. It's a sense of ease and comfort that comes by taking just a few drinks I saw others taking with impunity. I experienced ease and comfort for the first time in my life, and on that, I drank some more. My mom suffered from this illness. And about 6 months prior to this first drunk, this illness took her life. I watched her go in and out of detoxes and rehabs and psychiatrist's office, you name it, they tried it, but never placed here. And about 6 months prior to this first drunk, I lost my mom, and my legs were taken out from under me. My design for living was taken right out of me, and I had no clue which end was up. And of all the things I've experienced, drinking, that had to be one of the most painful. When I continued to drink Saturday night, the fear of my dad was removed, the fear of the cops were removed, the fear of me being me was removed, and the pain of losing this woman was also removed. Alcohol worked. Bill Wilson says in his story, I had arrived, and as I continued to drink beer that night, I arrived. I got to be taller, better looking, muscles, and every girl in the corner wanted to go with me in the worst way. What are you laughing at? A little reemergence of ego, sorry. I'm trying to get better. What a good deal. I mean, I was in the moment. I wasn't plagued by before on that first drunk. I wasn't plagued about what was going to happen later on. All I know, I was drinking. I was feeling good. I was Dirty Harry and Beretta rolled into one, and what a great deal. By the end of the night, in my neighborhood, The Godfather, we think, was an educational movie, and suddenly I was one of the characters in The Godfather, hanging out on a corner. What a great deal. I was part of life at last. I was having an experience, and I wondered, why did I wait so long for this? I was no longer in that moment even concerned with fears because they weren't plaguing me. I wasn't identifying what my mind was telling me. I was in the moment, present to the moment. Now, I've heard many of us tell stories about what happens to us even on the first drunk. All the horrible things that happen to us, the consequences on the first drunk. You know what? None of that stuff happened to me on the first drunk. It was a great night. I went home, I went to bed, I got up the next morning, and I remember going down to the park to play ball that morning, and on the way into the park, I experienced something different. My shoulders were a little bit wider on the way into that park. I had gotten my stripes the night before, and there were no consequences. I mean, I've heard terrible things happen to some of us on the very first drunk. I remembered everything. I didn't get sick. There were no fistfights, no arrests, none of it. Never soiled my clothes. I remembered everything. What a good deal. I had no idea that when I picked up that drink and got drunk, I just stepped onto a road paved right to hell, and it was called alcoholism. I knew nothing about a threefold illness that separates me from the moderate and the hard drinker. Knew nothing about that stuff. I knew nothing about this spiritual malady. I knew nothing about an obsession to alcohol, a phenomenon called craving. I just knew last night I drank, it got me to that place out there that was indescribably wonderful, and I'll take more. Because it got me away from me for the first time. What a good deal. And I'll tell you this, alcohol worked on my alcoholism for a very long time. It was a solution to my bedevilments. It was not a problem. I drank to feel good, and the only problem was, at the end, it turned in its flight, as Bill says, like a boomerang, and cut me to ribbons, and took me literally to death's door, and I don't give that lip service. I was in serious, serious trouble in 1988. I will never be as old as I was until the day I walked in here, ever. I didn't know that on that Saturday night. The fear of my dad, the fear of the cops, the pain of my mom, me being me, all removed. What a good deal. And I remember waiting for the following Saturday to roll around because I was going to get to that place once more that was indescribably wonderful. Excuse me. The following Saturday rolled around and we drank. And I got fired up, but it was just a little bit different. I was already in a state of obsession because during the week all I can think about was drinking. And the weekend would roll around, I'd drink it, get fired up, and wait for the next weekend. And then you know what happened? Saturday rolled into Friday and Saturday, then it became Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Then I started drinking during the week. I was a wannabe musician. My hero went from like Mickey Mantle to Keith Richards in about 2 weeks. After practice, I would start drinking beers, and little by slowly, I start to experience some consequences because of my drinking. My dad would be out socializing, and I would wait for him to leave, and then I'd leave. And I had 2 kid brothers at home who idolized me. I mean, they really looked up to me. They wanted to be what I was trying to be, and act like me, and talk like me, and all dress like me, everything. And I would leave the house sober, and very, very often come home a nasty, ugly drunk, dumping lots of earthy language on them about this terrible deck of cards God gave me. He took my mom, he left me with this guy who's 20 feet tall in my mind's eye. I'm scared to death if I call him dad, and life, and I don't want to grow up to be an adult because I can never pull it off. I was scared to death, and they got all of it. And they wondered what walked in the door. And little by slowly, from idolizing me, they started to become fearful of me. See, I can never stand at a podium and tell any newcomer or anyone, just don't drink today and you're a winner, because that's bad information. That's a lie. That's selfish and arrogant. Because my big book tells me I'm like a tornado roaring through the lives of others. I leave damage and debris, and the first people to experience it is the people who love me most, my family. And my 2 kid brothers and my dad got all of it. And I come in here and I'm blessed with this message that awakens my spirit. I'm given a way of living beyond my wildest dreams, and you want me to just sit here and that's all I have to do? I need to go back there and repair the damage I did. Because they were getting it. My book tells me years of living with an alcoholic will make any wife or child neurotic. The whole family is to some extent ill, and they didn't do anything except hanging there with us. And on that, let me thank all the Al-Anon members who are here over this weekend. I thank you for all you do in your great fellowship. I thank you. It was different for me back then. I could never see the consequences of my actions. I could never see how much I was offending other people. I was driven by alcoholism and I had no choice. My dad would hear about what walked in the door the night before and he would read me the riot act. He would corner me. My dad's a longshoreman. It isn't like Leave It to Beaver where dad has a shirt and tie and we go retire in the library and have a talk. My dad, any room would do. And he let you know how he was feeling. And he would read me the riot act. And my biggest problem back then was his problem with my drinking. My kid brother's problem with my drinking. Everyone's problem with my drinking, just leave me alone. And I would wait for him to finish, and out the door I went, and I continued to drink and go on another drunk. And the consequences got more severe than that. Because what I started to experience, what Bill talks about in the story, when the morning terror and madness were on him, guess what? It was on me. And I was just out of the starting gate, and I was experiencing this stuff. I was already experiencing the obsession to alcohol and this craving for alcohol. That the craving for me was never satisfied, only intensified when I went on a drunk. Some of the consequences I started to experience was not only waking up with the morning terror and madness, but I never had money. And so what I would do, like a good alcoholic, is start to steal, take things that didn't belong to me, but belonged to other people. So I would take money or jewelry or whatever was around. Out the door I went, felt justified by it. And then one morning I woke up and I couldn't find anything, but what I did discover was my dad's checkbook. So I got to brainstorm, if I forge his name and go down to the bodega or the liquor store, I can cash it, get fired up, and go on a drunk. I did that for a short time. Back then I didn't know anything about checking statements. And so all this stuff came back to him, and he came looking for me. And he caught me over in Lower Manhattan. And I was sitting in a car with this girl, and I was drinking, and he drove up and jumped out of the car and screamed my name. And I ran out of the car, and I says, "You deal with him, I'm out of here." And he caught me. And what I did was, like a coward, which alcoholism turned me into, was I started to come up with a lot of fake tears about the poor me's, the neighborhood I was staying in, it's her fault in the car over there. And my dad didn't buy any of it. And I went off to my first rehab. And I spent 28 days in my first rehab. And what I did was, it consisted of me doing push-ups and sit-ups, learning a lot of therapeutic words, dysfunctional family, enablers, things like this. All words that would never help me seek this power, all words that would never help me have an experience with God. But there I was for 28 days, and I looked great when I got out after 28 days. I went to the gym, I was working out, I was eating great, sleeping great, and never ever conceding to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. I went away to get the heat off. And I'll tell you this, my first handful of rehabs were not because I thought I had a problem, it was to get the heat off. It was no noble act by me, it was to get the heat off. It got too hot, I'll go to rehab and relax a little bit. I'll chill out, I'll detox. I'll get three meals in a cot and everything will be okay. And I got out and I went right back to the same vicious cycle. I got a job as a longshoreman on the Brooklyn waterfront. Not exactly the training ground for spiritual growth, by the way. Guys are fed up with the day at sunrise down there, and I show up. And there I was, and you know, wherever I went, there I was, and I took my alcoholism into that environment. For the most part, for a lot of years, it went unnoticed. My dad was always one of like a shop steward or a foreman who had this impeccable reputation, and then I went to work for him. And little by slowly, he started to experience the hideous four horsemen. He started to experience terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair, not because he was a drunk, but I was. And it wasn't because me, Pete, was that powerful, but alcoholism, which owned me, is and was back then. And it will level everything in my path. And it started to do that with him and people I work with and my family. And I started to do things like, borrow money from people who I shouldn't be in the same neighborhood with. They wanted to get paid every week a little bit, and I never had it. I would take things that didn't belong to me, do a lot of legal things, all for the price of a drink. Never ever would my mind, my alcoholism let me see the consequences of my actions. Why would it? Wants me dead, settle for me drunk, and will pretty up a junkyard to get me there. Never let me see the consequences, and I start to bring my alcoholism wherever I went. And after working down there a few years, I was asked to leave. I got bounced off the waterfront and taken back and bounced off of there for good. And by the time I left the waterfront, I had severed a lot of good bonds with people, some real good friends. I had severed those relationships because of my behavior. And all I could do was point fingers at, you did this to me. That's all my alcoholism allowed me to see. I got a job as a longshoreman on the waterfront, and shortly afterwards I made my second rehab. And then I made my third rehab. And then I made my fourth rehab. And from now I went from living with my parents, my dad and his wife and my kid brothers, to living with my grandparents. And I lived from house to house to house. And my dad would take me in and throw me out, and take me in and throw me out. Anything to help me see my truth. And all I can do is have hate for them. Why are you doing this to me for? And they would give me money and deny me money, give me money and deny me money, anything to help me. And I would go from girlfriend to girlfriend to girlfriend, and trust me, when you're drinking in a bar at around midnight and you're drunk, she looks just like Bo Derek. And I would wake up in the morning and look more like Bo Diddley, and I wonder how I got into that jam. There were many unhappy scenes in my apartment, trust me. My family was starting to become riddled with alcoholism, and they're not alcoholics. But I remember going into my fifth rehab, and my dad had got me this little apartment, this little studio apartment, and the idea was I was going to go to rehab, get out, go back to work, and he was hoping I'd meet a nice girl and get married, and all of this stuff would go away, not realizing that no human power could relieve me of alcoholism. But that was their hope. Anything to take me out of what I was experiencing. And that was the torments of alcoholism. And I went into this fifth rehab, and I spent 9 weeks in there. And I was separated from alcohol for 9 weeks. I was physically separated for 9 weeks. And I was out on a Saturday and drunk on a Monday. Being separated from alcohol has very little to do with being a recovered alcoholic. It just meant I was separated, and that's all it meant. And I will tell you, I had many, many times a powerful desire to stop drinking, to no avail. A powerful desire to stop drinking will not keep me stopped. I experienced that. Page 24 in my big book tells me that. It may get me to a room called Alcoholics Anonymous. It may get me to a rehab. It may bring me to a place of asking someone for help, but not enough to keep me in a place of recovered. It just meant I was separated. And back then, that's exactly what I was experiencing. One of the most powerful sentences in my big book is, lack of power, that is our dilemma. I lack power, no power, choice, and control over the first drink. Before I pick up a drink, and while I'm on a drunk, once the allergy kicks in, I didn't know that back then. I made so many sweet promises. I would look at my dad dead in the eye and say, Dad, I swear to you. I would look at my kid brothers dead in the eye and say, I swear to you, I will never ever do this again. And I meant every word of it. And then suddenly the thought would cross my mind that if I get a couple of drinks in me, then I can go about living life. And again, the consequences were pushed aside. I have no choice against the first drink. Many times people in Alcoholics Anonymous will think the drink through. Well, if you're a real alcoholic, guess what? It's a toss of the dice. You're going to lose. I've experienced that. Because if I can just think the drink through, why didn't I stop the first time alcohol bit me? See, many times you'll hear people come into AA and they say, I have a choice today. And my question I always sat with was, well, how come you didn't have choice when you were out there ripping up your life and everyone else's? Did you suddenly get choice when you walked in here? Why would God be that cruel to give me a choice of a weapon that can kill me? He won't. It's been removed. What I've been given here is power. Power. Ain't that great? By following 12 steps, I'm brought to a power greater than myself, and I experience this power, and drinking is now taken out of the equation. If you're new and someone's telling you it's normal to think about a drink because you're an alcoholic, they're shortchanging you and the power of God. Because step 10 tells me I'm placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. The problem has been removed. It's been done for us. By who? A loving God. And ain't that great to be excited about? If you're sitting here and you got white-knuckle sobriety, you follow the 12 steps, I can promise you, you'll have an experience, your experience with God. You will wake up and drinking is removed from the equation, and what freedom that is. Because I've experienced, trust me, I've experienced wonderful joys in Alcoholics Anonymous, incredible joys that words would fall short. And I've experienced an awful lot of pain and sorrow in Alcoholics Anonymous, and not once did my mind say, Pete, let's go have a drink to celebrate, let's go have a drink to wash the night away, because this is too hot to deal with. Never. The problem has been removed. What great hope that gives to someone who's new. And I will not give you an opinion this morning because I won't lie to a drunk. I'm going to share with you my experiences because they're true and they're real. I can't lie to a drunk because when they get drunk or die, I'm responsible for that drunk. About the information I'm passing on. We are responsible. Big Book tells me on page 68 that God will demonstrate through me what he can do, through you what he can do. What a great, great responsibility that is. Am I awake to do that? What message am I passing on? What am I doing for the newcomer? I would hear just don't drink and go to meetings, put the plug in the jug. Meeting makers make it. There's sobriety in the coffee pot. I'm still looking in coffee pot 16 years later. I don't see sobriety, I just see coffee. I was the type of drunk that would pull the plug out of the jug in a state of obsession. You know what? You know why? No power, choice, and control. I can't stop it. I have no input into the decision that's made for me by alcohols to go drink. I can't. Back then, that's all I could do. And I would curse myself, as Bill said, for being a weakling. Why can't I be a man and grow up and drink like other people? Why can't I just have one or two? Why do I even start the drunk? Why after 9 weeks I get out of a rehab and I find out I'm drinking again? When I swore to everyone and every saint, every church, every place I went to, I will never do this. Make prayers, and I just couldn't do it. In a state of obsession. Powerless over alcohol before I drink, because my mind is going to take me back to a drink no matter how much I don't want to. And once I pick up a drink and I'm in the allergy, nothing will stop it except alcoholism itself. And I experienced that in 1988 when I hit the bitter end. I got out of this rehab, and my dad got me this little apartment over in Brooklyn. And you know what I did to it? I've heard many people say how we bring the Bowery into our living room. I had like the whole Lower East Side of Manhattan in there. It was a horror show. My bed was soiled because I wasn't making it to the bathroom at night, nor did I care. There was no phone, no TV. I sold those. The clothes in my closet I sold. I had a refrigerator with no food in it. Bathing was the last thing on my mind. Drinking was the first, and I couldn't stop it. I would pass out and come to. I was starting to hear things and see things and just wish I would die. I was brought to a place of incomprehensible demoralization before I got sober. And I hated every fiber of my being. I got bounced out of this apartment, and I went to live on the streets. And I hit my 6th rehab, and I was in there about a day and a half, and I signed myself out. Counselors told me in this rehab, Peter, do not sign yourself out because you're going to die. You're in serious trouble. If you continue to drink, you're going to die. Your liver's in bad shape. The rest of you is falling apart. You're in serious trouble. And I couldn't listen to it. You know why? Because the state of obsession was so overpowering. I had to go. And if there was a crack in the wall, alcoholism was taking me through. And I had to go, and I signed myself out, AMA, and out the door I went, right back to the same vicious cycle. And I didn't even care anymore. In fact, I welcomed the idea to die. My contact with a higher power was, with a few choice words, take me from this, if you're even out there. And God in his infinite mercy, when he sees his children hurting, like he did with me, what do we do with our children? We hold them in our lap and teach them. We hold them in our lap and let them know they're loved and instruct them. My God did not punish me or banish me somewhere. I wound up outside the Port Authority over in Manhattan. And I was on the 9th Avenue side of the Port Authority. It's a pretty busy intersection, kind of a rough area. And I don't know till this moment how I got there or what happened afterwards, but I had this moment of clarity. And a book talks about what at first seemed to be the flimsy reed proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. I didn't know that. But in this moment, what I thought of, I was struck sober. I had a moment of clarity. I think we all get it. And in this moment, I knew deep down in here what I was, conceding to my innermost self what I was. And I had thought of my mom who passed, my dad and my kid brothers who I hadn't seen for quite some time. And I knew what I had turned into. And I looked around me and I hated everything. And I looked up to the overhead where the buses were running over me on this overhead, and I cursed God for doing this to me. You did this to me. When I was about 14 after my mom passed, I think we all also get separated from this power somewhere. My mom brought me up with really good values. She taught me how to pray. I'm a Catholic. She would take me to church. She would tell me over and over again how much God loves me, how much God loves our family. And I watched her suffer from alcoholism and take her life and die. And I held on to that. I think I was separated from this power. And here I was outside the Port Authority. And the same thing happened to me that happened to her. And I let God know about it. And I'll tell you this, my first year or so in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was not a God lover. I had a serious problem with this conception of God. But God didn't make any judgments on me. He saw one of his children sick. And I don't know what happened to me afterwards, but I know I wound up in another hallway. And I was really experiencing the bitter end. And I remember being in this hallway, and I knew it was over. I knew I was going to die. And I didn't want to die. For the first time in my life, I didn't want to die. I remember the first time I was homeless and running through the streets in New York, and I thought, wow, this is a pretty good deal. All I have to do is panhandle by the Manhattan Bridge, get enough money to keep the drunk going. And then nightfall came. And every night when the sun would go down and I was running through the streets, I never experienced fear like I did then. And it hit me one day, if I died on the streets, no one knows, and I don't even know who cares anymore. And I would run through the streets scared to death, driven by fear and owned by alcoholism. In this moment of clarity, I'm in this hallway. And God serves me my truth once again. And in this moment of clarity, all I can think of was calling my dad, because he's the only one who's going to come get me. We hear in Alcoholics Anonymous how God works through people. It is not only people in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's people. And it could be a parent, it could be a loved one, it could be one of your children, it could be a police officer, it could be an employer. It's people. That they say the right thing or they show up at the right time, the perfect time. It's God's time. And all I can think of was my dad. And he was out of town, and I remember going to a telephone to make a couple of collect calls to him. And I would go to make the phone call, and I was having these crying jags, and I'd well up with tears and have to hang up the phone. And I make another call and a third call, and I never made that call, but he was out of town, and he told his wife he had a feeling that I was in trouble. And he left where he was and came looking for me. And he found me over in Brooklyn. And this time he didn't jump out of the car. He walked across the street. Now, I had made a sincere plea to God in a hallway that if you're out there, please take me from this, and I don't want to die. And there were no reservations anymore, no lurking notion. There was nothing. I was stripped of everything. Like I said at the beginning of this talk, everything was removed from me. And it was drink and die or live. And I says, if you're out there, please take me from here. And my dad shows up. And I will tell you, if it wasn't for the courage, strength, and direction that God gave my dad, you have a different speaker here this morning. What I've been very blessed is that my dad's been able to see this journey that God has put me on the last 16 years and has showed up at most of my AA birthdays. And for years now on my AA birthday, I either give a card to my dad or make a call to him and just thank him for all he's done for me. And I pray to God I never forget that or the people who were here for me when I walked in the door in 1988. But I made this call to my dad, and he came looking for me rather. And I remember him walking across the street, and I said, "Dad, I'm okay. Everything's fine." And I had blood-stained pants on and construction boots with big holes in them, and I hadn't bathed in quite some time. I was about 40, 50 pounds underweight, and I was looking the part of a dying drunk. And I remember collapsing into his arms, and this I remember very clearly, because he's not this type of guy, but I remember him holding on to me, and him patting me on the back and telling me that I was going to be okay. I was going to be okay, and he was not going to lose his son to this. And off I went to my God-willing 7th and last rehab. And I was in this rehab for about 10 days, and Bill talks about in the Mayflower Hotel where the insidious insanity of the first drink is coming back. It was galloping back to me. I was in this rehab for 10 days, and all I can think about was I have to get out of here to get some Mr. Boston Blackberry brandy in me. And then I can go to group and talk about my dysfunctional family, my inner child, and all my enablers, and do push-ups and sit-ups and all of that. By the grace of God, that didn't happen. He interrupted my death and my plans again, and I went off to Minnesota, in God's country, where people disturbed me many times on a question of alcoholism. They gave me truth. They says, "Peter, you're suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience would conquer. You tried money, no money, job, no job, girl, no girl. You tried it all, and it didn't work." And they gave me truth that you need to find your God, no one else's but yours. And that's where I met that man who told me, "Where are you with God in the 12 steps?" After about 10 months of living in Minnesota and experiencing some torment being separated and starting to experience some joy being separated, I was brought home. And I was brought to my first home group, the Free Spirit Group. And I had a sponsor there who was a no-nonsense guy who began a journey through the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous with me and taught me about living in all three sides of the triangle, experiencing all three sides of the triangle. And little by slowly, my life started to be reborn. And I went through these 12 steps and made amends and cleaned up a lot of wreckage in my past. And I became a productive, active member in Alcoholics Anonymous, always willing to give back. About 2 years ago, a new teacher was put in my life, a new sponsor from Texas. And I began going through this work again. My family started to become reassembled. I started to experience some joys, some wonderful joys, being a part of, a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and being separated from alcohol. I went through the steps again. I was one of those guys who would sit in the back of the room after a few years, experiencing contempt, pride, or investigation, saying, "Hey, I went through the steps. I can live in 10, 11, and 12 forever, and that's okay. But why would my ego allow me to see truth?" And it was doing the thinking for me. And I started to hit a wall after about 14 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything was good on the outside. Even the ducks were in a row. And I started to experience some really good comfort. And when I found out in here that we can be a prey to comfortability and manageability. Because everything gets nice, everything gets comfortable. The wife lets you back in the bedroom, or the husband lets you back in the bedroom. You got a pocket full of money. You're working. Everyone knows you in AA. And ego says, "Rest on your laurels now. You're okay." And little by slowly, we start walking right back into untreated alcoholism. And how about experiencing strange mental blank spots separated in Alcoholics Anonymous? Alcoholism has a great way, if we're untreated, to go underground and resurface elsewhere. And we go on anger sprees, food sprees, gambling sprees, sex sprees, you know it, but no one else is supposed to. No one else is supposed to. And we show up at our home group or my home group and say, "I'm doing great." Just came off a 2-day binge of anger, fear, whatever it may be, but no one's supposed to know because my ego won't allow me to tell you I'm in trouble. And the spirit is screaming, "Go ask for help." And guess what? After 14 years, I hit a wall in here. And I'm praying, I'm meditating, I'm working with others, I'm going to meetings, I'm speaking all over, and there was something in here that was not right. And I could not deny the Spirit. You cannot deny God. So this gentleman shows up. If you're looking for a sponsor and you don't know who to ask, tonight in your prayer or right after this meeting, turn to your Heavenly Father and say, Father, I need a teacher. I promise you, you trust me, a teacher will show up. Because after about 14 years, I hit a wall with my sponsor, bless him. I said, Father, I need a new teacher. And maybe I need to let go of this contempt, pride, investigation and experience this work again. I have a new experience with this power. I have a new experience with the steps, because people who are seem to be very much awake, and those people would walk into a room and not say a word, but their eyes were on fire, and you knew it. The whole department shouted. They were a man with the real answer, and I wanted what they have. And again, I was seeking this with the desperation of a drowning man. And my God did not deny me. Why would he deny me someone to take me to him? Not a loving God. So Mark H. from Texas shows up, and I go through this work again. And was it really about looking to stay away from the drink like I did when I first walked in here with that sort of desperation? May never experience that sort of desperation again, but I had desperation to be integrated with this power and be excited about my prayer meditation and be of service to others. And that's how I approached it. Because I've had an spiritual experience as a result of these steps, not as a result of steps 9.5. I have no outstanding amends. My past has been cleaned up. I just went through the work again, and I can tell you I'm clean. I've entered the world of the Spirit, not sort of. Not on steps 9.5. And that's been done for me. By no power within me, but by God. One of the great things I've come to experience in here and going through this work again is watching my family be touched by the Spirit. Because God will do for me what I can't do for myself. And what a great thing is to have your family involved with your recovery. And watch them see you wake up and take this message into those affairs. My book tells me a much more important demonstration of these principles, my home, occupation, and affair. And that's what I've been able to do. And I fall short in thought, word, and deed a lot. One of the greatest lessons I've learned here is never, ever to be identified with my mind. There was a great commercial on years ago. It would say, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. It's a great thing to waste. Many times you'll hear new people, as I did, saying, I'm going out of my mind because I'm doing this and I'm acting out this way and I'm acting out that way. I'm going out of my mind. And my reply to them is, no, if you were out of your mind, you'd be doing great. You're too much in your mind. The main problem in the Alcoholics Center is in the mind, not the body. That's why I talked about a moment ago, those strange mental blank spots with these sprees we experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. It happens. That's where the main problem for us is. So we say, I'm never going to go on that anger spree. I'm never going to go on that sex spree. I'm never going to go on that gambling or food spree. And then we're back in it again, wondering, how did this happen? And right in the middle of a spree, we have a moment of clarity saying, oh my God, I'm doing it again. Or we come out of it emerging remorseful, swearing off, we're never going to do that again. And we're plagued over and over and over again. That's bondage of self. And we can be freed from that. I've experienced both ends of that. That's why I talk about it so freely to you. What great news our book, what this fellowship offers us, to find a God of understanding and experience it and walk with it. I've had some wonderful experiences with meditation that has completely transformed my life. And one of the benefits of these experiences in meditation was this. I would pray to this God. I start to believe I was having an experience with this God. But there was a part of me that always wondered, does my God know me, Pete? And then I have God gives me some gifts in meditation. And for the first time, I realized that God knows me, and that was a great freedom. What a great experience. When I was drinking, when I was in the grip of the grapes, I would make these bargains with God. That if you're out there, please let my mom show up one time for me. I just want to hold on to this woman and tell her I love her. I never got that opportunity. And I would be in these drunken stupors and argue with God and debate with God, please let my mom show up. Now that didn't happen. When I first get separated from alcohol, for some reason I was moved to go back to my place of religion. And I was also moved to light 2 candles while I was visiting. And one was for the sick and suffering in and out of the rooms, and one was for my mom. And both are truly miracles, because why would a new drunk be concerned about another drunk? But that's what my God allowed me to do. And I would light candles for the sick and suffering and one for my mom. And I would do that faithfully, once a week, twice a week. Sit down in this place of worship, talk to my God, and light 2 candles. Well, I'm sober about 8 or 9 years. I'm working really hard with this practice of meditation. And I'm in this meditation, and I'm sitting in this area, this beach. And off where the water meets the sky, off on the horizon, appears, walking towards me, my conception of my God. And as he walks towards me, out of him appears my mom. And from an adult, I became this little 8-year-old boy, and she walked towards me, and she kneeled down, and I remember her in this meditation holding me, and me holding her. I remember seeing tears roll down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sorrow, they were tears of joy, and I knew that. And I stood up and I was adult again, and my God put his arm around me, and there were no words spoken to this whole experience, but he let me know with his eyes, the most peaceful, loving eyes I've ever saw in my life. Let me know that she's with me, she's okay. I wondered for years, where's my mom? I know she's passed on, but where is she? Is she okay? If I can just hold her. And what she did as an adult, she walked over to me and held on to me once again. Then she stepped back, and off to the horizon on the left, there she pointed out all these lights, hundreds and hundreds of lights lit up, like a city night sky. And then she pointed off to the other side, and there were hundreds and hundreds of lights. She walked back over to me, held on to me, and her and my higher power walked away. They became one, and I came out of meditation. And I was in there for a while, and when I got done, I was very much moved and somewhat emotional. And I called up my sponsor, and I shared this experience with him. And he said to me, haven't you been lighting candles for your mom for about 8 or 9 years now? I said, yeah. And he said, well, she let you know that she got them. She finally got them. And so in that experience that I've had, and there have been many, and your experiences, I was convinced that my God knew me. My big book tells me sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. But when God shows up, and you know it. It's profound, it's life-changing, it's transforming, it's resurrecting, you're reborn, and you know it. And you can't deny it. And talking about God, you know silence makes much more sense. I can share with you all my experiences with this power, but silence makes more sense. Walk with me. All I fall short with, walk with me. See how I live, how I get to live because of what you have given me and what this power has given me. And then maybe the words I speak this morning will have even that much more credibility. I heard someone say something wonderful, don't watch the way a man talks, watch the way he walks. So I invite you, with all my falling short, into my life, to see what you have given me, what you have done for me. My family's been reassembled. I've met wonderful, wonderful people in my life. Great teachers in Alcoholics Anonymous. I get to experience this power all the time. I get to speak around the country and been out of this country to speak. What a great privilege. And I'll just share something quick about that. I seem to attract a lot of people who have relapsed over and over and over again and just can't get it. And I get to speak to hundreds of alcoholics outside of my little neighborhood of AA. And when I talk to them, I ask them some questions for consideration. I've always heard people say, you know, those who get drunk don't make meetings. And I said, there has to be something behind that. There has to be a deeper meaning to that. People who don't make meetings get drunk. There's got to be something more that's attached to that. And I found it in my travels. because almost every one of them said that they stopped making meetings, but more importantly, their relationship with their God stopped. There was nothing going on, and they were out of the sunlight of the Spirit. And for people like that, there's one alternative: drink. And if we're lucky, we get back. The importance of having an experience with God. This whole thing that we do here is about God, having an experience with God. Now, you go into some AA meetings and say, well, don't talk about God because you'll scare the newcomer out. If he's lucky, booze will kick him back in. This whole thing is about having an experience with this loving and caring God. I've gotten to meet some wonderful people, some wonderful teachers, and I get to do lots of traveling. I'm an active member in my home group. My better half, I like her to stand up, is Linda. She accompanies me on all these trips. Linda, just stand up and say, hey. And thank you for being so kind to Linda since we've been here. In closing, I will tell you, I hope to always stay teachable and be a student, and never to ever forget where I come from, and always give this message back with the same love and gratitude you have given it to me with. I thank you for my life, and I thank you for my sobriety.